Hello there, this is your good old average banker, and I'm here to bring you another discussion about the latest games. Before we begin, I just want to ask if you can show me some love and support via the like, subscribe, and bell icon. I want to improve my content to all the folks who love video games, so if you want to share me some feedbacks and comments, I would be forever grateful. As always, this is spoiler territory. In this series, we go elbow deep in the analysis and investigate if Elden Ring is as great as what the corporate gaming media has set out to be. Elden Ring, the successor to the series of games that gained renown for the variety of enemies, character builds, arsenal of weaponry, memorable boss fights, level design, the combat, and for the lack of cohesion in their story. All this can be found in this game, with the exception that the world environment has been massively expanded in an open world format. I can fathom that all the fans who fell in love with those previous games will massively dive headstrong into this one as well. Now, I'm not one of those fans. I have zero experience in previous FromSoftware games. However, I had many expectations considering the marketing build-up in this game. Let's look at the achievement thus far with this game. The expanded level design in an open world format. This game comes in with an open world that is filled with a variety of enemies, items, bosses, dungeons, secret routes, hidden NPCs, and even teleportation devices which you can discover on your own. The size is massive in scale and density. The density of a particular area involves multiple levels in verticality consisting of beaches, ravines, rivers, swamps, deserts, cliffs, mountain paths, mountain tops, and some hidden dungeon that leads you to a whole new underground map. Anywhere you go, there is a sense of intrigue built upon the excellent artistic style and the unique architecture of a far-away landmarks. While at ground level, you see the cliffs beside you, and you head in a direction to discover a path to the top. At the cliff's edge or at a bridge, you pan the camera constantly to see if there are ways you can jump down to the ravine below safely. You see a faraway island and discover an underground passage that leads to it. You look at that map and see a dead end to discover explorable catacombs. Every time you venture off in exploration, 80% of the time you find a reward that furthers your character. Be it upgrades, new weapons, new spells, new summons, new armor, new bosses, or even finding an NPC that has their own side quest. This is a great incentive system to keep the player engaged and continue to play this loop. The only catch here is that the player has to find their way to make this loop work, which leads to my next point, navigating in this world. I want to mention that this game is the least accessible game I have ever played in an open world game. There are no minimaps, no waypoints, no side quests, trackers, or written item description that give clear indication to the next destination or side content. The world map comes with these markers that clearly tells the player to go fill it out themselves. There are least conspicuous markers in the world that point to the places of interest, like these birds that faces off into the distance and you wonder what they are looking at. Is there something there? Then there are these weird looking statues or a dim glowing flame in the darkness of a blue misty night. These implicit waypoints actually does not just point to side content but also to the main campaign direction as well. For the waypoints, these are actually on the map. The save points that you encounter actually points to a direction generally to where you're supposed to go. Usually it is not hard if you ride in that direction to discover the largest and most impressive structure is probably where you need to go. The sense of mystery, exploration, discovery, and reward actually reminds me of past JRPGs. In those world maps, you wander aimlessly to try and discover for yourself side dungeon, towns, and the next destination that would drive the story forward. Given this, I don't actually mind, but actually give appreciation to the developers that has taken this approach and applied it to a world as rich in diversity and density in the lands in between. To not hold the hands of players in such a fashion, I would say it's such a bold approach, if not a very ballsy one, considering the sheer scale of this open world map. They are definitely not playing it safe. In place of bold red markers to indicate your way, they did include subtle ones that are highly inconspicuous and very indirect. This approach actually reminds me of what video games were like, garnishing feelings of mystery, exploration, discovery, and reward. If you must put a pin on it, I think this is the main concept that was applied to this game, and I think it's a very proud achievement. As I traverse this vast and immersive world, I find myself constantly asking questions about the location, the enemies, and the backstories to them. There is just so much unexplained lore that gives breadth to the unique settings in which it is pivotal to this game. And I think it is the driving core to the player's engagement. You move on from place to place, finding mysterious dungeons, and I think for me, part of the hope was finding more about why this catacomb is here. Who dwell in these coffins? Why are these monsters guarding the entrance? I mean, I'm not looking for expository dialogue on the level of Kojima in the famous Death Stranding type game. Maybe just a note that you find at the end of the dungeon that give a little explanation. The Witcher 3 games does this pretty well. When I first arrive at this swamp location, I'm wondering, what kind of creature are these? Why are there zombies soldiers roaming the land? Why is this guy so salty and began attaching people's arm to himself? Why are there giants chained to pull this cart? What's the story behind these dragons? What is this underground palace? And why have this guy hanging upside down shooting meteorites at you? Why are there so many chairs here? And so many more questions comes to mind. I think this sense of discovery and question drives the player forward. Besides the item or skills as a reward, you don't get much of the story. You seem to explore these locations hoping for some answers, but there are none, and as a result, a detriment to the cool design of the world building. Side quests. What do I think about side quests? To those quote-unquote side quests, if your idea of roaming aimlessly in a large open world such as this, due to an NPC giving you a one-line tip of what to find, I guess you can call that side quest. Don't get me wrong, the NPC are pretty cool looking with their awesome armor, but I think it generally hides the emptiness behind their mysterious backstory. You come to discover that, unfortunately, not much of their backstory is revealed. Some actually just generally kills them off without much answers. I guess if you're a fanboy of the previous games, I think this is well within your comfort zone. To be honest, actually I'm a sucker for good story games. So when I saw the marketing that George R.R. Martin was involved, I actually thought that his contribution would better the game's story. Of course, the clear signs are there. The author that takes 4 years to write 2 pages, who is actually known for his long, convoluted, and deep storytelling developments of protagonists and antagonists. The man that wrote so many books that would contribute to a developer that is known for his lack of story. Maybe George wrote 5,000 pages of good old story, but this guy took 2 lines of it and disregarded the rest. Sorry, back to those side quests. Recall that you have 0 markers or logs for these quests. I think in most cases you come across NPC. They ask you to do something, but without any journal log, you forget what you have to do. You quickly forget and continue exploring, and by some miracle come across that exact location where you need to be, reminding yourself you got this open side quest to complete. When I said that this game reminds me of good old-fashioned RPG gaming, I mean it because I actually have to keep on going to their Elden Ring wiki and find out how or where this stupid NPC is. And even if I find this NPC, I couldn't give her the stupid potion. Maybe I am missing something, but I'm not sure what it is because I have no log or side quest tracker. I think you get a sense of nostalgia from dealing with these kind of mechanics when you were a kid playing those old JRPG. There's definitely a sense of nostalgia. However, nostalgia quickly fades. You find yourself frustrated that you have to constantly go to another window and look up what you have to do next, instead of having an in-game feature or even allow you to turn this feature on and off. But no, I get it, because the main concept and philosophy undertaking in this game is overcoming challenges and difficulty on your own. A small side note here, I actually read some of the other reviews, As other games that receive high praises most often, I hear about the criticism that the NPC's facial expression, their voice acting, their story are not on par, therefore the game doesn't receive their masterpiece rating. In addition, while some other games at release date launches, the game's performance is heavily criticized and contribute to their critique scoring. Whether the performance is due to bugs, pop-ins, load times, frame rate drops, and even general crashes. I don't hear the same consistency of these criticisms for this game though. The facial expression in this game is non-existent. The voice acting is mostly flat and robotic. The main character's stories and development, well, is missing in action. But you see, at the time of this recording, all critical reviewers state that it's almost 10 out of 10, while other game scores are always held back due to those exact same reasons that I mentioned. I guess it's something I just can't reconcile with. Okay, finally, moving on to combat. I can honestly say I don't really like this combat system because I feel it is actually very simplistic in its core mechanics, while overly cumbersome for the player to execute movesets. Before proceeding further, let's take a step back and understand what is the central pillar or brand for these type of games that are known for. It's difficult and the overcoming of difficulty. I think this is the philosophical DNA of all these type of games. With this in mind, let's proceed with the combat. Overcoming bosses are the highlight of each dungeon run. The bosses, depending on your gear, usually can easily kill you. Nevertheless, this overcoming difficulty mantra requires the player to, very effectively, and simplistically dodge and attack. The window to counter a boss is very narrow, and the boss can quickly kill you in a few hits. With these basic principles, inadvertently limits the player to a few effective builds, despite the huge range of build possibilities. I feel that this system actually puts the player into two extreme categories: frustration or boredom in those boss fights. Let me demonstrate. Let's look at the shields and guarding. Shields and guard can easily be broken by any boss no matter how much stamina you have. There are not many bosses where you can simply guard its combo fully and counterattack. What surprises me further is the parry skill on the shield is absolutely useless against bosses. It is actually much harder to parry successfully on regular enemies rather than just simply dodge and attack. Eventually, you have to dodge and attack or risk getting your guard broken. Guarded strike drains stamina more than dodging or attacking. There is another skill in the game that allows you to spend a bit of FP to turtle hardcore, making you almost invincible. Your block attack don't consume any stamina or HP for a limited time, but playing it this way is kinda boring. One of those extremes I mentioned. Well, what about playing as a spellcaster or a ranged weaponry such as bows? Well, the concept is, again, very simple too. You try to dodge, distance yourself, and cast your OP spells and shoot your arrows at the boss until you run out of FP. This is actually hard to do because the boss will always rush you with a powerful melee attack. Since your spells are mostly slow casting, you'll die over and over again, becoming more frustrated each time. The other issue is your character are not very nimble. Again, we're talking about a mage build here, so therefore you are as nimble as you can be. This frustration extends to any builds that focus on any heavy weapons that have a slow attack speed. As the boss counter window is so narrow, most often the case, you get hit again before your next attack connects. I actually play as a mage in my first playthrough. Outside of boss fights, it's so boring to play as a mage. You keep your distance, you cast your spells, and you drink your FP flask. Without any story to engage me, I was aimlessly exploring Limgrave and truly bored to tears. When I first fought the first boss, I felt there must be something I'm missing. The spellcast is slow, the boss moves fast, the counterattack window is short. You are frustrated in the boss fights while bored to tears in the open world. At this point, I looked up on how to change classes or respec my character, and I discovered you don't do that until you finish the second boss. Luckily, I could still pick up some swords and switch to a melee build, although very ineffectively. Then, at this point, the fun factor finally kicked in. Back to the dodge and attack mantra, overcoming difficulty kept me playing further and further. Okay, so what about the controls here? I haven't played the previous games, so I can't comment on whether the controls have improved or stayed the same. However, pushing the D-pad to select items to use, spells to use, weapons to use or swap, while dodging and attacking while embracing the overcoming difficulty principle, seems a bit much. I think this is by design, to amp up the frustration factor through difficult control, and artificially embracing again that principle of overcoming difficulty. It's pretty common for players to have more than 2 spells in which you then have to scroll through in one direction only. Also while dodging, moving, and finally executing that slow casting spell. Okay, now let's move on to the weapon variety, which is quite large. Though each type of weapons have very limited options of a light attack and a heavy attacks. Pushing that one button repeatedly will make your character combo, which I think is rarely can be used against bosses, especially those heavier weapon classes, due to the counter window being so narrow. Switching weapons during combat is not effective unless you're clear of the enemy, and provide no benefits unless you need to cast a spell or incantation. It is not like God of War where you can quickly switch between weapons and connect the next strike through a combo. I feel I have all these weapons, but really limited options on how to use them and combine them or connect them to each other in a meaningful way to combat. And finally, horseback combat. It's simply not great because most of the time you miss, which is why I get off my horse and fight on foot. Then the at release date performance is terrible on PC. I have an RX 3090 with pretty above standard hardware all around, yet there's frame rate drops and frequent crashes. I'm not too sure what to make of it. I also experienced my light attack button freezing and not responding from time to time, and a restart fixed that problem. I guess it is standard nowadays that games are released with more bugs, and that trend doesn't seem to be ending. The other gripes that I have is the slow door opening animation and the super long elevator rides. There are actual teleportation devices on the map, but I cannot teleport to another level without a long elevator ride. I guess they're trying to be immersive and let the player know there's a true scale in height and verticality to the next stage. The immersion is excellent in this game through the environment, the artwork, with the soundtrack. Though I have to say, the soundtrack as it stands fits the mood, which can be broken down into 2 categories. The feelings of a desolate world and an epic choir music in boss fights. I didn't find any track in this game memorable, but overall the music does its job, but barely meets the mark in my opinion. Overall, I feel this game is a bit overrated considering the simplicity in the battle system, the terrible controls, the lack of a driving and invoking story, the inexcusable inaccessibility of options. There's not even a pause button in this game. The flat and monotone thematic music. The only part of this game gets right is the world building and the variety of enemies. Sorry but not sorry, this game is no masterpiece.